Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, so today we're exploring a story that honestly sounds like pure fiction, but it is the absolute grounded truth behind the literal device you're using right now. The origins of modern computing were born from this absolutely fascinating collision of two completely different worlds. We're going to see how the foundations of the digital age were laid not by some unified global effort, but by a really unlikely mix of cutthroat corporate maneuvering in America and completely isolated, desperate engineering in war-torn Europe.
Just picture this for a second. On one side of the Atlantic, you had a massively funded $19 million corporate behemoth forged by Wall Street financiers. And on the other side, an engineer working completely alone, building a computer out of recycled materials and discarded old movie film. Throughout this explainer, we're going to uncover the bizarre shared history connecting cheese slicers, punch cards, and a highly advanced machine literally smuggled across borders in a military truck.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the father of trusts.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our story actually kicks off in the early 20th century with a financier named Charles Ranlett Flint. Now, Flint was a pretty interesting guy, an avid sportsman, the man who actually negotiated the Wright brothers' first overseas airplane sales, and a financial capitalist who earned the nickname the Father of Trusts. In 1911, he orchestrated a massive stock amalgamation to create the Computing-Tabulating-Recording Company, or CTR, and this is where computing history gets wonderfully weird. The modern tech industry basically traces its corporate roots back to meat slicers. Yep, Flint combined four companies: Bundy Manufacturing, which made time clocks; International Time Recording; the Tabulating Machine Company, famous for punch cards; and the Computing Scale Company of America, which built weighing scales and, you guessed it, automatic meat slicers.
Now, bringing all these totally unrelated industries together was very unusual for the time. Flint called this an allied consolidation. His logic was actually purely financial. You know, if times got tough, having separate, distinct lines of business meant the consolidation had multiple chances to meet its obligations and pay dividends, rather than relying on just one. It was basically the ultimate corporate safety net.
And I gotta tell you, Flint was a master of corporate valuation. He assigned this new CTR company a massive valuation of $17.5 million. But here's the kicker. The combined tangible assets of those four companies only added up to about $1 million. CTR was carrying a bonded indebtedness of $6.5 million, which was literally 3 times its actual current assets.
But look, despite those incredibly precarious financials, the scale was undeniable. This newly formed American corporate machine started out with 1,300 employees and massive amounts of capital, with plans stretching from Endicott, New York, all the way to Toronto. It was a sprawling, highly resourced organization just waiting for the right leader to actually focus all that potential.
Which brings us to Section 2, birth of the IBM machine. That leader arrived in 1914. His name was Thomas J. Watson Sr. He had just been fired from the National Cash Register Company, NCR, and was facing a potential prison sentence due to a recent antitrust conviction for running a scheme to force used cash register retailers out of business. Despite all this peril, Flint brought him in as general manager. Now, during that antitrust trial, Watson's own extortionate letters and writings were actually used as evidence against him. That hard lesson taught Watson to keep very little in writing ever again. Instead, he brought a succinct, powerful motto over from his days at NCR, embedding it deep into CTR's identity. Just one word: think.
Watson was, without a doubt, a transformational leader. Inheriting 400 demoralized, poorly supervised salesmen, he radically shifted the culture. He demanded sincerity, integrity, and honest, fair, and square competition. He even introduced company songbooks to boost morale and established a foundational philosophy: we sell and deliver service. By 1924, having grown the company's revenue and culture significantly, he rechristened CTR with a much more expansive name: International Business Machines, or as we all know it today, IBM.
Moving right along to Section 3, the Punch Card Foundation.
Out of all the companies Flint merged to create IBM, one interested Watson the most, and it's absolutely the one that birthed modern data processing: Herman Hollerith's Tabulating Machine Company. Hollerith had originally developed his semi-automatic punching, sorting, and tabulating machines while working at the U.S. Census Bureau. By using punched cards to process the massive 1890 and 1900 U.S. Census data, Hollerith had inadvertently set an industry standard that would literally define data input for the next 80 years. This provided IBM with the ultimate foundation for data processing, backed by a massive, highly resourced commercial environment.
All right, shifting gears a bit. Section 4, the lone genius of computing.
While IBM was busy building a global corporate empire through sales forces and holding companies, we've got to shift our narrative across the Atlantic to wartime Germany. Here we meet Konrad Zuse, a lone engineer at an aircraft company who simply wanted an automatic device to manage his incredibly lengthy engineering calculations. Now, Zuse is often referred to as the inventor of the modern computer, but just contrast IBM's millions with Zuse's reality for a second. He built the world's first fully functioning computers using recycled materials donated by university staff and students. Because paper was in such short supply, he actually stored his programs on discarded old movie film. And historically speaking, the Nazi government completely refused to fund his research into electronic valves simply because they believed they were close to winning the war and didn't need further research. So he was entirely isolated.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because working practically alone, Zuse iterated rapidly. In 1936, he built the Z1, the first binary computer. By 1939, he completed the electromechanical Z2, and then, in 1941, he unveiled the Z3. This was the world's first electronic, fully programmable digital computer based on a binary floating-point system. Sadly, tragically really, the Z1 through Z3 models were all destroyed during the war.
But against all odds, Zuse's work survived through sheer determination. To protect his final mechanical machine, the Z4, he literally smuggled it out of Germany in a military truck. He hid the delicate computer equipment inside horse stables along the route. He eventually made it safely to Zurich, Switzerland, where the Z4 was installed at the Federal Polytechnical Institute. And get this, it remained in use all the way until 1955.
And that brings us to Section 5, First Steps in Programming. You know, physical hardware survival was just one part of Zuse's brilliant legacy. And this brilliantly illustrates how his isolation forced him to conceptualize not just the machine itself, but the very language humans would use to speak to it. Today, Zuse's work forms a critical pillar of academic computer science. He wasn't just building mechanical calculators, he was single-handedly laying the groundwork for how computers process logic.
In 1946, Zuse wrote Plankalkel, which is widely considered the very first algorithmic programming language. He even used it to write the world's first chess-playing program. Plankalkel was incredibly advanced for its time. It included concepts like arrays, which, if you're not familiar, are basically collections of identically typed data items accessed by indices, and records. These are absolute foundational programming concepts that are still taught in computer science classes around the world today.
Think about this. Even though Zuse was building his Z3 machine out of discarded parts and old movie film, his conceptual architecture perfectly mirrors the fundamental structure of the computers, laptops, and smartphones we all use today. It had a punch tape reader for data entry, a dedicated control unit, a floating-point arithmetic unit for the math, and input/output devices. The blueprint was absolutely flawless.
So what does this all mean? Which brings us to the ultimate question we are left with today. As we've seen throughout this explainer, the digital age really rests on a dual narrative. On one hand, you have Charles Flint and Thomas Watson building this aggressively scaled, multi-million-dollar corporate machine literally born from meat slicers and time clocks. On the other hand, you have Konrad Zuse, a lone maverick smuggling a masterfully architected computer through a war zone in a military truck. So what truly drives the future of technology? Is it the vast, organized resources of an allied corporate machine? Or the sheer undeniable resourcefulness of a lone genius? Think about that next time you pull a smartphone out of your pocket. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep questioning the world around you.